Captain Sarah Mitchell thought she knew her place in the Air Force. 3 years flying. C-130 cargo runs between bases, hauling supplies and equipment across the Pacific. Routine flights, predictable schedules, nothing glamorous. But on a foggy Tuesday morning at Hickam Air Force Base, everything changed. An urgent call came through the radio. An F-35 squadron was down a pilot for a critical mission, and they needed someone immediately. Sarah's call sign, Phoenix, had caught the attention of Admiral James Hartford, the Pacific Fleet's most decorated commander. What he knew about her flying record would shock everyone, including Sarah herself. This is the story of how one cargo pilot's hidden skills launched her into the most dangerous mission of her career. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm pierced through the pre-dawn quiet at Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii. Captain Sarah Mitchell rolled out of her narrow bunk, muscle memory guiding her through the familiar routine she'd performed hundreds of times over the past 3 years. Boots, flight suit, coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Carter administration. Another day, another cargo run. Sarah had joined the Air Force with dreams that stretched far beyond hauling pallets of MREs and spare parts across the Pacific. She'd imagined herself in the cockpit of an F-35 Lightning II, breaking the sound barrier over contested airspace, engaging enemy fighters in aerial combat that demanded split-second decisions and nerves of steel. Instead, she found herself piloting a lumbering C-130 Hercules, a reliable workhorse that moved at the speed of bureaucracy and handled about as gracefully as a flying refrigerator. The irony wasn't lost on her. During flight school at Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi, her instructors had praised her reflexes, her spatial awareness, her ability to process multiple streams of information while pulling G-forces that left seasoned pilots reaching for airsickness bags. Her call sign, Phoenix, came from an incident during advanced training when she'd recovered from what should have been an unrecoverable flat spin, bringing her T-38 Talon back from what everyone thought was certain disaster. The instructor said they'd never seen anything like it, but the needs of the Air Force, they told her, required cargo pilots, the unglamorous backbone of military operations. Someone had to keep the supply lines moving, and her test scores indicated she had the patience and precision required for long-haul transport missions. Fighter pilot slots were limited, reserved for the absolute elite. She was good, they said, but not that good. Sarah had accepted her assignment with the grace expected of an officer, but the disappointment burned like acid in her stomach. Every time she watched F-35 screaming overhead during joint exercises, she felt that familiar pang of what might have been. She'd made peace with it, or so she told herself. 3 years of flying cargo runs between Hawaii, Guam, Japan, and the Philippines had given her more flight hours than most pilots accumulated in a decade. She knew the Pacific like her own backyard, could navigate through weather systems that sent other pilots scurrying for alternate airports. This particular Tuesday started like any other. Sarah grabbed her flight bag and headed toward the flight line, where her C-130 waited like a patient gray elephant. The morning briefing had been routine. Medical supplies to Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, then a load of communications equipment to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa. 14 hours of flying time if the headwinds cooperated. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Tony Rodriguez, was already conducting the pre-flight inspection. Rodriguez had been working the flight line longer than Sarah had been alive, and his weathered hands could spot potential problems that computerized diagnostics missed. He'd taken Sarah under his wing during her first year, teaching her the subtle art of reading an aircraft's mood through vibrations, sounds, and smells that didn't show up in technical manuals. "Phoenix, you've got a clean bird today," Rodriguez called out as she approached. "New engines installed last week, hydraulics are solid, and I personally verified every rivet on those cargo rails." She fly like a dream. Sarah smiled at the sergeant's pride in his work. Rodriguez treated every aircraft under his care like a member of his family, and his maintenance record was legendary throughout the Pacific Air Forces. Pilots specifically requested aircraft that Rodriguez had certified, knowing they could count on arriving at their destination, with all systems functioning. As she began her own walk-around inspection, Sarah noticed unusual activity on the far side of the airfield. Several F-35 Lightning Eyes were parked near the alert facility, their sleek profiles looking like predatory birds compared to her bulky cargo hauler. Ground crews swarmed around them with the urgent efficiency that indicated a rapid deployment scenario. Sarah felt that familiar twinge of envy, wondering what mission had scrambled the fighter squadron while she prepared for another routine cargo run. The morning briefing had mentioned increased tensions in the South China Sea. Chinese naval forces had been conducting aggressive patrols near disputed islands, testing the resolve of American allies in the region. Several close encounters between military aircraft had made international headlines, and diplomatic protests flew back and forth like shuttlecocks in a badminton match. But cargo flights continued regardless of political posturing. Supplies still needed to move, equipment still required transportation, and the mundane logistics of military operations ground forward with mechanical inevitability. Sarah completed her inspection and climbed into the cockpit, where her co-pilot, First Lieutenant Marcus Thompson, was already running through pre-flight checklists. Thompson was a recent graduate from pilot training, eager and competent, but still learning the subtle nuances of long-range cargo operations. He reminded Sarah of herself 3 years ago, full of enthusiasm and secret disappointments about his aircraft assignment. "The weather looks good today, Captain," Thompson reported, scanning the meteorological data on his tablet. "Some scattered thunderstorms near Guam, but nothing we can't navigate around." "Kadena is reporting clear skies and light winds." Sarah nodded, settling into her seat and beginning the familiar ritual of switch positions and system checks that preceded every flight. The K-130's cockpit was spacious compared to fighter aircraft, designed for comfort during long missions rather than the cramped efficiency of aerial combat platforms. But after 3 years, it felt like home. Every switch, every gauge, every warning light held meaning that she could interpret without conscious thought. As they prepared for engine start, the radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. "Hickam Tower, this is Pacific Command Operations Center. We need to speak with Captain Sarah Mitchell immediately. Please have Phoenix contact operations on secure frequency." Sarah and Thompson exchanged glances. Direct contact from Pacific Command Operations Center was unusual for a cargo flight. Typically, their missions were coordinated through routine channels, with operations centers handling dozens of flights through administrative efficiency rather than personal attention. "Hickam Tower, this is Phoenix," Sarah transmitted. Switching to secure frequency as requested, she adjusted her radio settings and contacted the operations center, wondering what administrative issue required her attention. Perhaps there had been a change in cargo manifests, or weather conditions had closed one of her scheduled destinations. But the voice that answered her call carried an urgency that suggested something far more significant than routine logistics. "Phoenix, this is Colonel Patricia Hayes at Pacific Command Operations. We have an urgent requirement that may involve you. Can you report to the Operations Center immediately? Leave your aircraft in crew chief custody." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Urgent requirements didn't typically involve cargo pilots unless there was a humanitarian crisis requiring immediate supply drops. But Colonel Hayes' tone suggested something beyond routine emergency logistics. "Rodriguez," she called to her crew chief, "we've got a hold on this mission. Keep her ready for flight, but I need to report to operations." As Sarah and Thompson walked toward the operations center, the activity around the F-35 squadron intensified. More ground crews arrived, and she could see pilots being briefed in the squadron-ready room. Whatever was happening, it involved the fighter community, not cargo operations. The Pacific Command Operations Center occupied a secure building near the center of Hickam Air Force Base. Sarah had been there only once before, during her initial assignment briefing 3 years ago. The interior buzzed with the controlled chaos of military personnel managing multiple operations across the vast Pacific theater. Screens displayed weather patterns, aircraft positions, and intelligence summaries from dozens of locations spanning half the globe. Colonel Hayes met them at the entrance, her expression combining urgency with careful evaluation. Hayes had a reputation throughout the Pacific Air Forces as a brilliant strategist who had risen through the ranks on merit rather than politics. She commanded respect from subordinates and superiors alike, and her presence at this briefing suggested the situation's importance. "Captain Mitchell, Lieutenant Thompson, thank you for responding quickly," Hayes began, leading them toward a secure briefing room. "We have a developing situation that requires immediate action, and your unique qualifications may be exactly what we need." Inside the briefing room, Sarah was surprised to find Admiral James Hartford waiting for them. Hartford commanded the Pacific Fleet, making him one of the most powerful military officers in the region. His presence at a briefing involving a cargo pilot seemed surreal, like finding the Secretary of Defense at a routine supply inspection. Admiral Hartford stood as they entered, his bearing radiating the confidence that came from decades of successful command. He was younger than Sarah had expected, probably in his early 50s, with gray beginning to streak his dark hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of their appearance and demeanor. "Captain Mitchell," Hartford said, extending his hand, "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your reputation precedes you." Sarah shook his hand, confused about what reputation a cargo pilot could possibly have that would interest a fleet admiral. Her service record was solid but unremarkable: on-time performance, safety compliance, efficient fuel management, and crew leadership that kept her personnel motivated during long deployments. Hardly the stuff of flag officer attention. "Sir, I'm honored to meet you, but I'm not sure what qualifications I might have that would be relevant to your operations," Sarah replied honestly. Hartford smiled, the expression transforming his serious features. "Captain, do you remember an incident during advanced pilot training at Columbus Air Force Base? A T-38 Talon that entered an unrecoverable flat spin during aerobatics practice?" Sarah felt her cheeks flush. The incident had occurred during her final phase of pilot training, when overconfidence and a desire to impress her instructors had led her to push her aircraft beyond safe parameters. What should have been a routine aerobatic maneuver became a nightmare of spinning metal and screaming warning alarms as her T-38 entered a flat spin that defied every recovery technique she'd been taught. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Yes, sir, I remember," she said carefully. "It was a learning experience about respecting aircraft limitations. Captain, do you know how many pilots have successfully recovered from an unrecoverable flat spin in a T-38 Talon?" Hartford asked. Sarah shook her head, although she suspected the number was small. The T-38's aerodynamic design made certain types of spins particularly dangerous, and emergency procedures typically called for ejection rather than attempted recovery. In the past 20 years, exactly 3 pilots have managed that recovery, Hartford continued. 2 of them were test pilots with thousands of hours of experimental flight experience. The third was a student pilot in her 2nd year of training, flying under the call sign Phoenix. The silence in the briefing room stretched uncomfortably as Sarah processed this information. She had never realized the rarity of her recovery, having been more focused on the embarrassment of getting into the situation in the first place. "Your training records show reflexes and spatial awareness in the 99th percentile," Admiral Hartford continued. Your instructors noted an almost supernatural ability to process multiple information streams while under extreme stress. And your performance in simulated combat scenarios exceeded that of many pilots who were selected for fighter training. Sarah felt her world shifting beneath her feet. If her abilities were truly exceptional, why had she been assigned to cargo operations? Why hadn't anyone mentioned these evaluations before? Colonel Hayes stepped forward with a tablet displaying what appeared to be personnel files and performance metrics. "Captain, your assignment to cargo operations wasn't based on any deficiency in your abilities. It was a strategic decision based on Pacific Command's long-term personnel requirements. We needed experienced pilots who could handle extended operations in challenging environments, and your psychological profile indicated exceptional stability under stress. More specifically," Admiral Hartford added, "we needed pilots who could seamlessly transition between different aircraft types while maintaining peak performance. Your cargo experience has given you skills that pure fighter pilots lack: long-range navigation, fuel management, weather interpretation, and crew coordination during extended missions." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to understand the implications of this revelation. Had her entire career been orchestrated as preparation for something she knew nothing about? "Sir, what exactly are you asking me to do?" She managed. Admiral Hartford activated a wall-mounted display that showed a map of the South China Sea. Red markers indicated Chinese naval positions, while blue symbols represented American and Allied forces. The tactical situation looked like a chess game with very high stakes. "Captain Mitchell," the Admiral said, "we have an F-35 squadron that's about to launch the most critical mission in the Pacific theater in decades. And as of 2 hours ago, they're one pilot short." The tactical display dominated the briefing room wall, its red and blue symbols telling a story that made Sarah's stomach tighten. Chinese Type 052D destroyers formed a threatening line across international shipping lanes, while their aircraft carrier Shandong positioned itself like a queen on a chessboard, controlling vast stretches of contested water. 12 hours ago, Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Barnes was scheduled to lead this mission. Admiral Hartford continued, his voice carrying the weight of classified information. "She's been flying F-35s for 4 years, accumulated over 800 combat hours, and knows these aircraft systems better than the engineers who built them. This morning, she's in a hospital bed at Tripler Army Medical Center with acute appendicitis." Colonel Hayes manipulated the display, zooming in on a cluster of islands that Sarah recognized from her cargo routes. The Spratly Islands had been a source of international tension for years, with multiple nations claiming sovereignty over the rocky outcroppings and their surrounding waters. Intelligence reports indicate that Chinese forces are preparing to establish a porous, permanent military installation on Mischief Reef, Hayes explained. Satellite imagery shows construction equipment, prefabricated structures, and what appears to be runway preparation. If they succeed, they'll control one of the most strategic choke points in global shipping. Sarah studied the display, her cargo pilot experience providing perspective that pure fighter training might have missed. She knew these waters intimately, had flown over them hundreds of times during supply runs to various Pacific bases. The reef's location would indeed create a stranglehold on commercial traffic, potentially disrupting trillions of dollars in annual trade. "Our mission," Admiral Hartford said, activating another layer of tactical information, "is to conduct what the Pentagon calls a freedom of navigation operation. 4 F-35s will approach the reef, document the construction activities, and demonstrate that international waters remain open to legitimate traffic." The apparent simplicity of the mission didn't fool Sarah. Freedom of navigation operations in contested areas were essentially aerial games of chicken, with fighter aircraft from opposing nations testing each other's resolve while politicians held their breath and hoped nobody made a catastrophic mistake. "Sir, I appreciate your confidence in my abilities," Sarah said carefully, "but I've never flown an F-35. My experience is entirely in transport aircraft. Surely you have other pilots with appropriate qualifications? Admiral Hartford's expression grew grim. Captain, this isn't just about pilot availability. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes wasn't selected randomly to lead this mission. The F-35 she was supposed to fly contains specialized equipment that requires a pilot with very specific skills. He nodded to Colonel Hayes, who activated yet another display showing technical schematics that Sarah didn't immediately recognize. The aircraft diagram looked like a standard F-35, but with modifications that suggested capabilities beyond normal fighter operations. This particular Lightning II has been configured for electronic warfare and intelligence gathering, Hayes explained. In addition to its normal combat systems, it carries equipment that can intercept enemy communications, jam radar installations, and collect detailed imagery of ground installations. Operating these systems while maintaining flight performance requires a pilot who can process multiple information streams simultaneously. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. Her unusual assignment pattern, the emphasis on her multitasking abilities, the careful development of her experience base across different aircraft types. She was beginning to understand that her career hadn't been a series of disappointments, but preparation for something much larger. The electronic warfare package adds significant complexity to the aircraft systems, Admiral Hartford continued. The pilot must monitor traditional flight parameters while simultaneously managing intelligence collection equipment, analyzing intercepted communications, and coordinating with ground-based analysts. It's like flying a fighter jet while simultaneously operating a mobile intelligence station. Lieutenant Thompson, who had remained silent throughout the briefing, cleared his throat nervously. Sir, will Captain Mitchell have time for proper training on the F-35 systems? The checkout process typically takes months. Colonel Hayes smiled for the first time since they'd entered the briefing room. Lieutenant, your captain has been receiving F-35 systems training for the past 18 months. Though she may not have realized it, Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process this information. 18 months of training that she hadn't recognized as training? Then she remembered the seemingly random additional duties she'd been assigned over the past year and a half. The computer-based training modules that had appeared in her quarterly requirements, labeled as General Aviation Systems Updates. The simulator sessions she'd been required to complete, supposedly for maintaining proficiency in advanced avionics. The weekend workshops on electronic warfare principles that had been presented as professional development opportunities. The flight simulators you've been using weren't generic trainers, Admiral Hartford explained, reading her expression. They were F-35 system simulators with the displays modified to look like transport aircraft interfaces. Every training scenario you completed was actually preparation for Lightning II operations. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her entire recent career had been an elaborate preparation program designed to develop skills she didn't know she was learning. The frustration she'd felt about seemingly pointless training requirements had actually been carefully orchestrated professional development. How long do I have to decide? She asked, though she already knew her answer. The mission launches in 6 hours, Admiral Hartford replied. Chinese intelligence has undoubtedly detected our increased activity levels, so delays aren't an option. If we're going to act, it has to be today. Sarah looked at the tactical display again, imagining herself in the cockpit of an F-35 instead of her familiar C-130. The transition from cargo operations to fighter missions seemed impossible, like asking a truck driver to compete in Formula One racing. But the technical briefings she'd endured, the simulator sessions she'd completed, the systems training she'd dismissed as bureaucratic requirements had apparently been building toward this moment. What happened to the other pilots in the squadron? She asked. Surely Lieutenant Colonel Barnes wasn't the only qualified pilot available. Colonel Hayes pulled up personnel rosters on her tablet. Major David Chun is deployed to Afghanistan, not available for recall. Captain Lisa Rodriguez is on emergency leave following a family crisis. Captain Michael O'Connor is grounded pending medical evaluation after a minor accident last week. And Captain Jennifer Walsh is 8 months pregnant. The catalog of unavailable pilots drove home the reality of their situation. Military operations didn't pause for personal emergencies or medical issues. Missions had to be completed regardless of personnel challenges, using whatever resources were available. The remaining squadron members are all first-year F-35 pilots, Admiral Hartford added. They have the basic qualifications to fly the aircraft, but none of them have experience with the electronic warfare systems. This mission requires someone who can handle both the flying and the intelligence gathering simultaneously. Sarah understood the impossible position they were in. A mission critical to Pacific stability hinged on finding a pilot who could master complex systems while navigating one of the world's most dangerous airspace environments. And somehow, her unconventional background had made her their best available option. "If I accept this assignment," she said slowly, "what happens to my cargo mission?" "Lieutenant Thompson can't fly that route alone. Your C-130 mission has been reassigned to another crew," Colonel Hayes replied immediately. "Medical supplies for Guam will be delivered by a KC-135 returning from a refueling mission, and the communications equipment for Kadena can wait until tomorrow. This mission takes absolute priority." The ease with which her carefully planned cargo route had been dismantled and reassigned struck Sarah as somehow symbolic. 3 years of routine operations could be rearranged in minutes when circumstances demanded it. But transitioning from cargo pilot to fighter mission leader felt like crossing a bridge that she might never be able to recross. "I need to see the aircraft," she said finally. "And I want to meet the other pilots I'll be flying with." Admiral Hartford's relief was visible, though he maintained his professional demeanor. "Colonel Hayes will escort you to the F-35 squadron area. You'll have 2 hours for aircraft familiarization and mission briefing with your flight members. Then we'll proceed to final preparations." As they walked toward the door, Sarah felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. In 6 hours, she would either be flying the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world on a mission that could influence international relations, or she would be explaining to her superiors why she had declined the opportunity of a lifetime. Morning sun seemed brighter as they emerged from the operations center, and the distant sound of jet engines carried a different significance than it had just hours earlier. The F-35 she had envied from afar were no longer symbols of missed opportunities, but tools she might soon be trusted to operate in one of the world's most challenging environments. "Lieutenant." Thompson walked beside her in silence, clearly processing the dramatic change in their circumstances. His routine training flight had transformed into proximity to high-level military strategy, and his role had shifted from co-pilot to observer of events beyond his current security clearance. "Captain," he said quietly as they approached the fighter squadron area, "are you sure about this? It seems incredibly risky to transition aircraft types on such short notice." Sarah considered his question as they walked past maintenance crews preparing aircraft for missions she couldn't discuss. Risk was an inherent part of military aviation, but this seemed to push beyond normal boundaries into territory that demanded either exceptional confidence or exceptional desperation. "Thompson, 3 years ago, I thought I knew what my career would look like," she replied. "Cargo routes, transport missions, logistic support. Safe, predictable, important but not glamorous. Today, I'm learning that everything I thought I knew about my assignments was carefully orchestrated preparation for something I never imagined." They paused at the entrance to the F-35 squadron building, where security guards verified their credentials and clearances. Beyond the doors lay aircraft and personnel dedicated to missions that Sarah had only read about in classified briefings. "Maybe the question isn't whether I'm ready for this opportunity," she continued, "but whether I've been ready all along and just didn't know it." The F-35 Lightning II sat on the tarmac like a predator waiting to strike. Sarah had seen these aircraft from a distance countless times, but standing directly beneath one revealed details that photographs couldn't capture. The stealth coating gave the fuselage an almost organic texture, as if the aircraft had grown rather than been manufactured. Every angle, every curve had been designed to deflect radar waves, creating a shape that seemed to bend light around its edges. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" The voice belonged to Captain Alex Morrison, the squadron's weapons systems officer who had been assigned to brief Sarah on the Lightning II's capabilities. Morrison was younger than Sarah had expected, probably in his late 20s, with the intense focus that came from working with cutting-edge technology every day. "I've never seen anything like it," Sarah admitted, running her hand along the aircraft's wing. The surface felt smooth, but somehow alive, as if it contained energy waiting to be released. Morrison gestured toward the cockpit, which sat higher off the ground than Sarah was accustomed to from her C-130 experience. The F-35 is essentially a flying computer with weapons attached. Every system is integrated through a central processor that manages flight controls, sensors, weapons, and communications simultaneously. The pilot doesn't just fly the aircraft, they conduct a symphony of electronic systems. As they walked around the Lightning II, Morrison pointed out external features that distinguish this particular aircraft from standard F-35 configurations. Additional antennas protruded from strategic locations, and panels that normally concealed weapons bays had been modified to accommodate specialized equipment. "This bird has been configured for what we call multi-domain operations," Morrison explained. In addition to standard air-to-air and air-to-ground capabilities, she carries equipment that can intercept enemy communications, jam radar systems, and collect detailed intelligence on ground installations. The pilot has access to information streams that would normally require an entire intelligence analysis team. Sarah climbed the ladder to peer into the cockpit, where she was struck by how different it looked from traditional fighter aircraft displays. Instead of dozens of individual gauges and switches, the F-35 cockpit featured large multifunction displays that could be reconfigured based on mission requirements. "The helmet is where the magic happens," Morrison continued, handing her what looked like a motorcycle helmet covered with sensors and electronic components. "This isn't just protection, it's a complete information management system. The helmet display can show you radar images, targeting data, navigation information, and intelligence feeds without requiring you to look down at cockpit instruments." Sarah hefted the helmet, surprised by its weight and complexity. The interior was lined with padding that would form a custom fit, and the visor contained layers of electronic displays that could project information directly into her field of vision. How does a pilot process all this information without becoming overwhelmed? She asked. Morrison smiled grimly. "That's exactly why they need you for this mission. Most pilots require months of training to effectively manage the information flow. But your background in cargo operations has given you something that pure fighter pilots often lack: the ability to monitor multiple systems simultaneously while maintaining situational awareness over extended periods." They were interrupted by the approach of three other pilots in flight suits, each carrying the distinctive F-35 helmets that marked them as Lightning II operators. Sarah recognized the configuration of a four-ship flight formation, with herself presumably filling the leadership position that Lieutenant Colonel Barnes had been scheduled to occupy. "Captain Mitchell," Morrison said, "meet your flight members for this afternoon's mission." The lead pilot stepped forward, extending his hand with a confidence that immediately established his experience level. "Captain Jake Sullivan, call sign Viper. I'll be flying as your wingman today. I've got about 2 years on the Lightning II and 600 hours of flight time in various combat scenarios." Sullivan appeared to be in his early 30s, with the weathered look of someone who had spent considerable time in challenging environments. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, and his eyes held the steady focus that Sarah associated with pilots who had seen actual combat. The second pilot was noticeably younger, probably fresh from advanced training. First Lieutenant Amy Chun, call sign Razor. This will be my first operational mission in the F-35. But I've completed all training requirements and my simulator. Scores are in the top 10% of my class. Chun's enthusiasm was evident in her posture and expression. But Sarah could also detect the nervousness that came with transitioning from training environments to actual operations. Her eagerness reminded Sarah of Lieutenant Thompson, full of competence but still developing the confidence that came with experience. The third pilot seemed to fall between his two colleagues in terms of experience and demeanor. Captain Robert Hayes, call sign Falcon. I've been flying F-35s for about 18 months, with most of my experience in training and exercise scenarios. This will be my first mission in contested airspace. Hayes carried himself with the measured confidence of someone who understood his capabilities and limitations. His introduction was straightforward without false bravado, suggesting the kind of steady reliability that Sarah valued in crew members. "All right," Sarah said, studying each of her flight members. "I need to be completely honest with all of you. Until 2 hours ago, I was preparing to fly a cargo mission to Guam. My F-35 experience consists entirely of simulator training that I didn't realize was F-35 training. If anyone has concerns about flying with an untested flight leader, now is the time to voice them." The three pilots exchanged glances, and Sarah could see them processing this information. In fighter squadrons, leadership typically went to the most experienced pilot, and her lack of actual F-35 flight time represented a significant deviation from normal procedures. Captain Sullivan spoke first. "Ma'am, Captain Morrison briefed us on your background and the circumstances that led to your selection. Your cargo experience means you have more actual flight hours than any of us, and your simulator scores in systems management are reportedly exceptional. We're prepared to follow your lead." Lieutenant Chun nodded agreement. "Captain, I may be new to operational flying, but I've studied enough mission reports to know that successful operations depend more on judgment and systems management and on pure flight experience. If Pacific Command selected you for this mission, that's good enough for me." Captain Hayes' response was more measured. "I'll be honest, Captain, this situation is unusual. But I've reviewed the mission parameters, and the electronic warfare requirements are definitely outside my comfort zone. If you can handle the intelligence gathering while we maintain formation and security, it might actually be an ideal division of responsibilities." Sarah felt some of the tension in her shoulders release. Leading pilots who questioned her authority would have made an already challenging mission nearly impossible. Having team members who were willing to trust Pacific Command's judgment gave her the foundation she needed to focus on the technical aspects of the Pathé operation. "Excellent," she said. "Now, let's talk about what we're actually going to do out there, Captain." Morrison led them to a secure briefing room adjacent to the flight line, where detailed mission charts covered every available wall surface. The displays showed weather patterns, known enemy positions, communication frequencies, and flight routes with the precision that characterized modern military planning. "The Chinese have established a significant presence around Mischief Reef," Morrison began, using a laser pointer to highlight areas of concern. "Intelligence reports indicate at least 2 Type 052D destroyers, multiple patrol boats, and what appears to be a temporary airfield under construction. They've also deployed mobile surface-to-air missile systems that can engage targets at ranges up to 100 miles. Sarah studied the tactical display, noting how the Chinese positions created overlapping fields of fire that would challenge any aircraft attempting to approach the reef. The placement of their forces suggested careful planning by someone who understood both the geography and the capabilities of potential opponents. Our approach will take advantage of them F-35's stealth characteristics," Morrison continued. "But stealth doesn't make us invisible, just harder to detect and track. Chinese radar systems are sophisticated, and they'll be looking for exactly the kind of operation we're planning. He activated another display showing their planned flight route, which involved a complex approach that would minimize exposure to enemy radar while maximizing their ability to gather intelligence on the construction activities. Will approach from the southwest at low altitude, using natural radar shadows created by the island formations. Captain Mitchell's aircraft will climb to optimal altitude for electronic intelligence gathering while the rest of the flight maintains defensive positions. The specialized equipment will automatically collect communications, intercepts, and detailed imagery of the construction site. Lieutenant Chen raised her hand. What's the protocol if Chinese fighters attempt to intercept us? Are we authorized to engage, or is this strictly a reconnaissance mission? Morrison's expression grew serious. This is where things get complicated. Our rules of engagement authorize defensive measures if Chinese forces initiate hostile actions. But the definition of hostile actions in international airspace can be subject to interpretation. Aggressive maneuvering, radar lock-ons, and close approaches might or might not qualify as threats requiring response. Sarah understood the implications immediately. They would be operating in a gray area where split-second decisions could have international consequences. The wrong response to Chinese intercept attempts could escalate a reconnaissance mission into an armed conflict that neither government actually wanted. The key, Morrison continued, is maintaining professional behavior while clearly demonstrating our right to operate in international airspace. We'll monitor Chinese communications, respond to any challenges through appropriate diplomatic channels, and document everything for post-mission analysis. Captain Sullivan leaned forward in his chair. What kind of Chinese aircraft are we likely to encounter? And what are their typical intercept procedures? Intelligence reports suggest they have J-20 stealth fighters operating from their carrier, along with J-15 conventional fighters for patrol operations, Morrison replied. Chinese intercept procedures typically involve close approaches designed to encourage foreign aircraft to alter course. They're usually professional but aggressive, similar to what we might do in their position. The briefing continued for another hour, covering communication procedures, emergency protocols, and contingency plans for various scenarios that Sarah hoped they wouldn't encounter. By the time Morrison finished, she felt as prepared as possible for a mission that seemed to exist at the intersection of diplomacy and combat operations. One final point, Morrison said as the briefing concluded. This mission has been personally approved by the Pacific Fleet Commander and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The intelligence we gather today will influence American policy throughout the South China Sea region. The pressure is significant, but so is the importance of what you're doing. As the pilots prepared to leave the briefing room, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. In less than 3 hours, she would be leading 3 other pilots into one of the world's most contested airspace regions, flying an aircraft she had never actually piloted, using equipment she had learned about in training sessions she hadn't recognized as training. The morning that had started with routine cargo operations had transformed into preparation for a mission that could influence international relations between superpowers. And somehow, her call sign Phoenix had put her at the center of events that reached far beyond anything she had ever imagined. The F-35's engine spooled up with a sound unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her cargo flying career, where the C-130's turboprops created a steady, predictable rumble. The Lightning II's Pratt & Whitney F-135 produced a high-pitched whine that seemed to vibrate through her bones. The aircraft felt alive beneath her, like a racehorse eager to run. "Phoenix, this is Hickam Tower." The controller's voice crackled through her helmet communications. "The weather is clear, the winds light and variable. You're cleared for takeoff when ready. Good hunting." Sarah advanced the throttle, feeling 35,000 pounds of thrust, pushing her back into the ejection seat. The F-35 accelerated down the runway with an urgency that made her 100 to 130 seem like it was moving through molasses. At 150 knots, she pulled back on the stick, and the Lightning II leaped into the Hawaiian sky with an eagerness that took her breath away. "Viper, Razor Falcon, check in," she transmitted as they climbed through 5,000 feet. "Viper's up. Systems green." Captain Sullivan responded immediately. "Razor's good to go," Lieutenant Chun added, her voice carrying barely controlled excitement. "Falcon's ready for business," Captain Hayes confirmed, his tone professional and steady. The 4 F-35s formed up in a loose diamond formation as they headed southwest toward their first waypoint. Sarah was amazed at how intuitive the Lightning II's flight controls felt, despite her complete lack of actual experience in the aircraft. The simulator training she hadn't recognized as F-35 preparation had apparently been more thorough than she'd realized. "Phoenix, this is Overlord," a new voice appeared on their secure frequency. Sarah recognized it as Colonel Hayes from the Pacific Command Operations Center. "You're cleared to proceed to Waypoint Alpha. Be advised, satellite imagery shows increased Chinese patrol activity in your target area." "Copy, Overlord." "Phoenix flight proceeding to Waypoint Alpha," Sarah acknowledged, while simultaneously activating the electronic warfare systems that made this mission possible. The specialized equipment came online with a soft hum that she felt more than heard. Suddenly, her helmet display filled with information streams that would have overwhelmed her just hours earlier. Radio intercepts scrolled across one corner of her vision, while radar analysis appeared in another. A third section showed real-time intelligence assessments from analysts monitoring their mission from facilities across the Pacific. "Phoenix, we're picking up Chinese communications chatter on multiple frequencies." Captain Morrison's voice appeared on their coordination channel. He was monitoring their mission from a secure facility at Hickam, providing real-time intelligence support. "Looks like they're aware of increased American air activity, but they haven't identified your specific flight yet." Sarah adjusted her heading slightly to take advantage of radar shadows created by the scattered island formations below. The South China Sea stretched endlessly in all directions, its blue surface broken only by the occasional fishing vessel or cargo ship, following established shipping lanes. "Razor, maintain position about 2 miles off my right wing," she instructed Lieutenant Chun. "Falcon, you and Viper spread out to provide early warning coverage. We need to detect any Chinese intercepts before they get close enough to compromise our mission." The formation adjusted smoothly, each pilot executing the movement with the precision that characterized modern fighter operations. Sarah was impressed by how quickly her inexperienced team had adapted to her leadership style, trusting her judgment despite her unconventional background. As they approached their first intelligence gathering point, Sarah began activating the specialized systems that made this F-35 unique among Lightning II aircraft. Arrays of sensors and communications intercept equipment came online, immediately beginning to collect information about Chinese military activities throughout the region. "This is incredible," she murmured, watching data streams populate her helmet display. The equipment was automatically categorizing radio transmissions, identifying radar signatures, and creating a comprehensive picture of Chinese naval positions that exceeded anything she had seen in the morning briefing. "Phoenix, be advised we're detecting J-20 stealth fighters launching from the Chinese carrier." Morrison's voice carried new urgency. "2 aircraft, heading northwest from the Shandong's position. Their course will intersect your planned route in approximately 20 minutes." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she processed this information. J-20s represented China's most advanced fighter aircraft, roughly equivalent to the F-35 in capabilities, but with design philosophies optimized for different mission profiles. An encounter with Chinese stealth fighters would test every aspect of their training and equipment. "Copy, Overlord." "Phoenix flight adjusting approach to minimize intercept probability," she responded. while calculating new headings that would keep them outside the J-20's most likely search patterns. The electronic warfare systems continued collecting intelligence as they flew, building a detailed picture of Chinese military activities around Mischief Reef. Sarah could see construction equipment working to extend what appeared to be a runway capable of handling military aircraft. Mobile radar installations provided defensive coverage, while patrol boats maintained security perimeters around the construction zone. Viper, are you seeing what I'm seeing on the tactical display? Captain Sullivan's voice held concern. Affirm. Viper, Chinese forces are more extensive than our briefing indicated. Sarah replied, studying the real-time intelligence flowing across her screens. Looks like they've accelerated their construction timeline significantly. The implications were troubling. If China could establish a permanent military presence on Mischief Reef ahead of schedule, they would control strategic shipping lanes months earlier than American planners had anticipated. The intelligence they were gathering might be even more critical than Admiral Hartford had indicated. Phoenix, this is Overlord, Colonel Hayes transmitted. We need maximum resolution imagery of the runway construction. Can you get closer to the reef without compromising your position? Sarah studied her tactical display, calculating distances and risk factors. A closer approach would provide better intelligence, but would also increase their chances of detection by Chinese radar systems. It was exactly the kind of decision that separated experienced pilots from those still learning their craft. Roger, Overlord. Phoenix flight moving to optimal imaging position, she decided. She adjusted their formation, bringing them to within 15 miles of Mischief Reef, while maintaining altitudes that should keep them below Chinese radar coverage. The specialized cameras began capturing detailed images of the construction activities, while communications intercept equipment recorded Chinese military transmissions for later analysis. Phoenix, Chinese patrol boats are increasing their search patterns, Morrison warned. Looks like they're responding to orders from higher command. You may have been detected. Almost simultaneously, Captain Hayes's voice crackled through the formation frequency. Falcon has radar contact bearing 270, range 40 miles. 2 fast movers heading our direction. Sarah's training kicked in as she processed the threat information. 40 miles gave them perhaps 5 minutes before the Chinese fighters could reach intercept range, assuming they maintained current headings and speeds. Phoenix flight, execute evasive maneuver Delta, she ordered, initiating a pre-planned escape route that would take them away from the reef while maintaining their ability to gather intelligence. The 4 F-35s banked sharply to the southeast, using their stealth characteristics and low altitude to minimize radar signatures. Sarah continued operating the intelligence-gathering equipment, determined to collect as much information as possible before they were forced to abandon the mission area. Phoenix, the J-20s are adjusting course to intercept, Morrison reported. They're definitely tracking you, though we're not sure how they acquired your position. Sarah felt sweat building inside her helmet as the tactical situation developed. This was the moment that separated simulator training from actual combat operations, when decisions carried real consequences and mistakes could create international incidents. Overlord, Phoenix has collected primary intelligence objectives, she transmitted. We're detecting what appears to be advanced radar installations and possible surface-to-air missile positions. Chinese construction activities are ahead of schedule by several months. Copy, Phoenix. Critical intelligence received. You're authorized to depart the area at your discretion. But even as Colonel Hayes gave them permission to leave, Sarah could see on her tactical display that the Chinese fighters were positioning themselves to intercept their escape route. The J-20s were flying with the aggressive precision that characterized pilots who believed they were defending their territorial waters. Viper, Razor Falcon, we've got company incoming, she announced. 2 J-20S, approaching from the northwest. Maintain formation discipline and follow my lead. This is about to get interesting." Lieutenant Chun's voice carried tension as she responded. "Phoenix, are we authorized to engage if they attempt to force us out of international airspace?" "Negative, Razor. We maintain defensive postures only. Our mission is intelligence gathering, not combat engagement. But be prepared for aggressive maneuvering by Chinese pilots." The distance between the keel formations decreased steadily as both sides maintained courses that would bring them into visual contact within minutes. Sarah could feel the weight of international relations pressing down on her shoulders as she prepared for an encounter that could influence diplomatic relationships between superpowers. "Phoenix, Chinese fighters are attempting radio contact on guard frequency," Morrison reported. "They're ordering you to identify yourselves and state your intentions in what they claim are Chinese territorial waters." Sarah switched to the international guard frequency, where she could hear Chinese pilots transmitting in accented but clear English. "Unknown aircraft operating near Chinese territorial waters. You are ordered to identify yourselves and depart the area immediately." She keyed her microphone, choosing her words carefully. "Chinese aircraft, this is United States Air Force Phoenix flight, conducting routine operations in international airspace. We are exercising freedom of navigation rights in accordance with international law." The response came immediately. "American aircraft. You are operating in disputed waters claimed by the People's Republic of China. Adjust your course to avoid territorial violations." Sarah could see the J-20s on her tactical display, now close enough that visual contact was imminent. The Chinese pilots were flying with the aggressive confidence that came from operating near their home bases, while her flight was hundreds of miles from the nearest American installation. "Chinese aircraft, we acknowledge your position but maintain our right to operate in international waters," she transmitted, while simultaneously preparing her flight for the visual encounter that would test everyone's professionalism and self-control. The morning that had started with routine cargo operations was about to culminate in a confrontation between stealth fighters from opposing superpowers, with Sarah at the center of events that could influence international relations for years to come. The first J-20 appeared as a dark speck against the blue sky, growing rapidly larger as the two formations converged. Sarah had studied intelligence photos of the Chinese stealth fighter, but seeing one in person revealed details that no briefing could convey. The aircraft's angular design created an almost alien silhouette, with canard forewings and a distinctive nose profile that spoke to different engineering philosophies than American designers had chosen. Visual contact. 2 J-20s at 11 o'clock, 5 miles, Captain Sullivan reported, his voice steady despite the tension crackling through their formation. Frequency. Sarah watched the Chinese fighters approach with professional interest, mixed with apprehension. The lead J-20 was flying with aggressive precision, its pilot clearly comfortable operating in contested airspace near home territory. The wingman maintained perfect formation discipline, suggesting experienced pilots rather than novices testing their equipment. "Phoenix flight, maintain current heading and altitude," she ordered. "We're operating in international airspace and have every right to be here. Let's see what their intentions are." The J-20s closed to within 2 miles before beginning a series of aggressive maneuvers designed to intimidate the American formation. The lead Chinese fighter pulled up sharply, rolled inverted, and dove past Sarah's aircraft with less than 500 feet of separation. The message was clear: "You are not welcome here, Phoenix." "That was dangerously close," Lieutenant Chen transmitted, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Are we going to tolerate harassment in international airspace?" Before Sarah could respond, the second J-20 executed an even more aggressive maneuver, crossing directly in front of Captain Hayes's aircraft with minimal clearance. The Chinese pilot then lit his afterburner, creating a wall of superheated exhaust that forced Hayes to adjust course to avoid turbulence. "Falcon's been forced off heading by Chinese aggressive maneuvering," Hayes reported. frustration evident in his transmission. Sarah felt anger building in her chest as she watched the Chinese fighters' deliberate provocations. These weren't accidental encounters or miscommunications. They were calculated attempts to force American aircraft out of international airspace through intimidation and dangerous flying. Chinese aircraft, your maneuvering is creating unsafe conditions, she transmitted on the guard frequency. Recommend you maintain safe separation distances in accordance with international protocols. The response came from the lead J-20 pilot, his English precise but loaded with authority. American aircraft, you are operating in sensitive areas during Chinese military exercises. For your own safety, we recommend immediate departure from this region. Sarah checked her tactical display, noting that the intelligence gathering equipment was still collecting valuable information about Chinese military activities. Every minute they remained in the area provided additional insights into construction progress, defensive capabilities, and communication procedures that would be invaluable to Pacific command planners. Overlord, Phoenix requesting guidance on Chinese harassment activities. She transmitted to Colonel Hayes, "We're being subjected to dangerous close approaches and forced course deviations, Phoenix. Maintain your mission as long as safely possible," came the immediate response. "The intelligence you're gathering is critical, but use your judgment on safety issues. We don't want an international incident." Phrase "international incident" crystallized the pressure Sarah felt. One miscalculation, one moment of poor judgment, and their intelligence-gathering mission could escalate into a confrontation that neither government actually wanted. Yet backing down from Chinese intimidation would send a message about American resolve that could encourage further territorial expansion. Viper, Razor, Falcon, maintain formation integrity, but be prepared for evasive action, she ordered. Chinese pilots are trying to force us out through harassment. We're not leaving until our mission is complete. The J-20s repositioned for another series of aggressive maneuvers, this time targeting Lieutenant Chun's aircraft. The lead Chinese fighter approached from below and behind, climbing rapidly until it was flying formation with Razor's F-35. The Chinese pilot held position for nearly 30 seconds, close enough that Chun could probably see into his cockpit. "Phoenix, this guy is right next to me," Chun reported, her voice remarkably steady considering the circumstances. "I can see him looking over at my aircraft. He's definitely trying to intimidate me." Sarah felt a surge of pride at the young pilot's composure under pressure. Chun was maintaining perfect formation discipline, despite having a foreign fighter aircraft hanging off her wing in what amounted to aerial harassment. "Razor, continue current heading and altitude," Sarah instructed. "Let's see how long he wants to play this game." The Chinese pilot finally broke away with another aggressive maneuver, diving sharply before pulling up into a climbing turn that took him directly across the American formation's flight path. It was expert flying designed to demonstrate superiority while skirting the edge of actual hostile action. "Phoenix, we're detecting increased radio chatter from Chinese ground installations." Morrison's voice appeared on their coordination frequency. "Sounds like they're coordinating with additional aircraft. You may have company arriving soon." Sarah's tactical display confirmed Morrison's assessment. New radar contacts were appearing from the direction of the Chinese carrier, suggesting that additional fighters were being launched to reinforce the intercept. The intelligence-gathering mission was becoming a test of wills between opposing air forces. "Overlord, Phoenix is detecting additional Chinese aircraft launching from carrier positions," she reported. "How long do you need us to maintain a station for complete intelligence collection?" "Phoenix, we need approximately 8 more minutes for full spectrum analysis," Colonel Hayes responded. "Can you maintain that position that long?" 8 minutes seemed like an eternity when facing aggressive harassment from stealth fighters, with more enemy aircraft en route. But the intelligence they were collecting could influence American policy throughout the Pacific region for years to come. "Roger, Overlord." Phoenix flight will maintain the station for 8 minutes. Sarah decided. As if sensing American determination to continue their mission. The Chinese pilots increased their harassment activities. The J-20s began executing coordinated maneuvers designed to disrupt the F-35 formation, with one fighter approaching from each side simultaneously to force defensive reactions. Phoenix flight. Prepare for defensive maneuvering, Sarah ordered as she watched the Chinese fighters position themselves for another aggressive approach. This time, both J-20s approached from opposite directions, creating a situation where any defensive maneuver by the American aircraft would bring them closer to one of the threatening fighters. It was a sophisticated tactical problem that required split-second timing and perfect coordination to resolve safely. Break right, break right. Captain Sullivan called as the lead J-20 closed to within 200 feet of Sarah's aircraft. Sarah pulled her F-35 into a sharp right turn, feeling G-forces press her into the ejection seat as the Lightning II responded to her control inputs. The Chinese fighter flashed past her canopy close enough that she could see details of its weapon systems and sensor arrays. That was too close, she muttered, anger overriding her previous restraint. Phoenix, Chinese aircraft are painting us with targeting radar, Captain Hayes reported, his voice carrying new urgency. They're simulating weapons lock-ons. The tactical situation had escalated beyond harassment into simulation of actual combat engagement. Chinese pilots were using their radar systems to acquire targeting solutions on American aircraft, stopping just short of activating weapons systems that would constitute acts of war. All aircraft maintain defensive postures, but do not activate weapons systems, Sarah ordered, recognizing that they were approaching the edge of rules of engagement that could trigger armed conflict. Phoenix, this is Overlord. Colonel Hayes' voice carried new authority. We're observing the Chinese radar activity. You are authorized to activate defensive systems, but not weapons. Repeat, defensive systems only. Sarah activated her F-35's electronic countermeasures, which immediately began jamming Chinese radar attempts to maintain targeting locks. The specialized equipment she carried provided additional capabilities, allowing her to disrupt enemy communications and create electronic interference that degraded Chinese situational awareness. Chinese aircraft, you are conducting simulated attack profiles against aircraft in international airspace, she transmitted on the guard frequency. Recommend you cease aggressive actions immediately. The response surprised her with its directness. American aircraft, you are conducting espionage activities against Chinese sovereign territory. We are authorized to use all necessary measures to protect our national interests. Word espionage hit Sarah like a physical blow. Chinese intelligence had apparently identified the specialized nature of her aircraft and mission, understanding that this wasn't a routine patrol but a deliberate intelligence-gathering operation. The stakes had just increased dramatically. Overlord, Chinese pilots have identified our intelligence-gathering activities, she reported. They're using the word espionage and threatening an escalated response. Copy, Phoenix. Complete your mission as quickly as possible. Additional Chinese aircraft are approaching your position. Sarah's tactical display now showed 4 new radar contacts, converging on their location from multiple directions. What had started as an encounter with 2 Chinese fighters was evolving into a confrontation with an entire enemy. Squadron, Phoenix flight. We've got multiple bogies inbound from various headings, she announced. Looks like 6 total Chinese aircraft converging on our position. This is about to get very complicated. Lieutenant Chun's voice carried tension as she responded. Phoenix, are we going to extract before this gets out of hand? Sarah looked at her intelligence displays, which showed critical information still being collected about Chinese military capabilities and construction activities. The mission was providing insights that could influence American strategic planning for years, but continuing meant facing odds that were becoming increasingly dangerous. Negative. Razor, we complete our mission, she decided. But prepare for immediate extraction. Once we have all required intelligence, the next few minutes would determine whether their intelligence-gathering mission succeeded or whether they would be forced to abandon their objectives in the face of overwhelming Chinese pressure. Sarah could feel the weight of international relations balanced on the edge of her decisions as enemy fighters closed from all directions. Sarah watched 6 Chinese fighters converge on their position like hunters closing on prey. Her tactical display resembled a deadly constellation, with enemy aircraft approaching from every compass direction, while her 4-ship formation held position in the center of an increasingly tight noose. Phoenix, intelligence collection complete, Morrison's voice crackled through her helmet. You've got everything we need. Recommend immediate extraction. But extraction was no longer a simple matter of turning toward home. The Chinese fighters had positioned themselves to block every escape route, creating an aerial cage that would force the American formation to challenge their intercepts directly. Phoenix flight. Execute scatter pattern Bravo, Sarah ordered, initiating a pre-planned evasive maneuver that would spread her aircraft across multiple headings while maintaining mutual support. The F-35s broke formation simultaneously, each pilot executing precise turns that took them away from the center of Chinese attention. Sarah dove toward the deck, using the Lightning II's superior low-altitude performance to complicate enemy tracking. Behind her, she could hear her flight members calling out positions and threats as they maneuvered through the developing aerial maze. Vipers clear. Heading 180, Captain Sullivan reported. Razors evading 2 bogies. Need support, Lieutenant Chun transmitted, her voice tight with concentration. Sarah rolled her F-35 inverted and pulled through a diving turn that brought her onto the tail of a J-20 pursuing Chun's aircraft. The Chinese pilot was so focused on his target that he failed to detect Sarah's approach until she activated her radar in a brief, aggressive lock-on. Chinese aircraft pursuing Razor. You have an F-35 on your 6 o'clock, she transmitted on the guard frequency, the unspoken threat clear in her professional tone. The J-20 pilot immediately broke off his pursuit, pulling into a climbing turn that took him away from Chun's aircraft. It was a moment of perfect communication between adversaries, aggressive enough to protect her wingmen, but restrained enough to avoid triggering actual combat. Falcon's got 2 on his tail. Requesting assistance, Captain Hayes called out, his usual calm cracking under pressure. Sarah could see Hayes's aircraft on her tactical display, being pursued by 2 Chinese fighters in a coordinated attack that would force him into an impossible defensive position. The Chinese pilots were flying with the aggressive confidence of aviators operating over home territory, pushing the limits of engagement rules to force American withdrawal. Falcon, continue evasive action. Viper, can you assist? Sarah transmitted while calculating intercept angles. Vipers engaging, Sullivan responded immediately, his F-35 turning toward Hayes's position with the determined precision of an experienced fighter pilot. The aerial chess game played out across 20 miles of contested airspace as American and Chinese fighters maneuvered for advantage without crossing the line into actual combat. Sarah found herself thinking like a cargo pilot even while flying a fighter mission, calculating fuel consumption, navigation requirements, and logistical factors that pure fighter pilots might overlook. Phoenix, this is Overlord. Colonel Hayes's voice carried new urgency. Satellite intelligence shows Chinese surface-to-air missiles going active. They're preparing to engage if you don't withdraw immediately. The tactical picture had evolved beyond aircraft intercepts into a comprehensive threat environment that included ground-based weapon systems. Sarah realized that Chinese commanders were escalating their response to match what they perceived as American escalation. All Phoenix aircraft, surface-to-air missile threat active, she announced. Execute high-speed extraction to waypoint Delta. The 4 F-35s accelerated toward their exit route. afterburners painting bright signatures against the blue sky as they climbed away from the threat envelope. Chinese fighters followed but maintained distances that suggested they were content to escort the Americans out of the area rather than engage in actual combat. Phoenix Flight. You're clear of Chinese intercept range, Morrison reported. Outstanding job completing the mission under extreme pressure. As they flew toward friendly airspace, Sarah felt the adrenaline slowly draining from her system. The transition from cargo pilot to fighter mission commander had been completed under circumstances that tested every aspect of her training and judgment. More importantly, they had gathered intelligence that would influence American strategy throughout the Pacific region. Overlord, Phoenix Flight returning to base with complete mission success, she transmitted. Intelligence package fully collected despite aggressive Chinese interference. Copy Phoenix. Admiral Hartford sends his congratulations on mission completion. You'll be debriefed immediately upon landing. The flight back to Hickam seemed to pass in minutes as Sarah processed the events of the past hour. She had led 3 other pilots into contested airspace, gathered critical intelligence under hostile conditions, and extracted her formation without compromising aircraft or personnel. The cargo pilot who had awakened that morning planning a routine supply run had proven herself capable of operations she had never imagined. Phoenix, Hickam Tower has you in sight. The familiar voice of the control tower welcomed them back to friendly territory. You're cleared for landing. Welcome home. The F-35 touched down on Hickam's runway with the same authority it had displayed throughout the mission. As Sarah taxied toward the flight line, she could see Admiral Hartford waiting beside the maintenance hangar, his presence indicating the mission's strategic importance. The debriefing lasted 3 hours, with intelligence analysts extracting every detail of their encounter with Chinese forces. The imagery and communications intercepts they had collected revealed construction progress that was months ahead of previous estimates, along with defensive capabilities that exceeded intelligence predictions. Captain Mitchell, Admiral Hartford said as the formal debriefing concluded, "Your performance today exceeded our highest expectations. You've proven that unconventional career paths can produce exceptional operational results." Sarah stood at attention, still processing the dramatic change in her military trajectory. "Sir, I'm honored to have contributed to mission success. But I have to ask, what happens now? Do I return to cargo operations, or ... Hartford's smile answered her question before he spoke. "Captain, effective immediately, you're being reassigned to the 421st Fighter Squadron. Your call sign, Phoenix, seems particularly appropriate for someone who has risen from routine operations to exceptional achievement." 6 months later, Captain Sarah Mitchell was leading F-35 missions throughout the Pacific Theater, her unique combination of cargo experience and fighter capabilities making her invaluable for complex operations requiring both tactical skill and strategic thinking. The intelligence gathered during her first mission had influenced American policy decisions that strengthened Allied positions throughout the South China Sea. Lieutenant Thompson, her former co-pilot, often saw her F-35 launching from Hickam on missions he wasn't cleared to know about. He would remember that Tuesday morning when a routine cargo flight had been canceled, launching his aircraft commander toward a destiny that none of them could have predicted. The Phoenix had indeed risen from the ashes of routine operations, proving that extraordinary opportunities sometimes find those who are prepared to seize them, even when they arrive disguised as impossible challenges. And in secure briefing rooms throughout the Pacific, military planners continued to study the intelligence that Sarah and her flight had gathered during those crucial minutes over the South China Sea. Intelligence that had been purchased with courage, skill, and the kind of leadership that emerges when ordinary people are called upon to achieve extraordinary things. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.